Do you see my slides?
Yes, we can see it.
Excellent. Okay, so again, my name is Tianca Crocker. I'm an assistant professor in the social work school as an affiliate faculty of School of Data Science at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what opportunities to promote digital equity for entrepreneurs and sort of this idea of digital hospitality as opposed to digital equity. And I look forward to your questions, so feel free to ask those. So let's see. So just some level setting, and this are things that have been talked about already today, but what we know so far that about 18% of US businesses are minority owned, equates to about 10 million. There's higher concentrations of certain minority owned businesses in urban cores in southern states in the Southwest. So I sort of dropped the southern US because we know that there are higher concentration as well in states like Washington and New York and Illinois. So we just know that there are certain concentrations in some areas. We know that minority owned businesses are often and have a higher percentage of sole proprietorships and fewer employees in some other businesses. Some previous speakers have spoken to the correlation between Black business density and COVID-19 incidents in the United States, as well as the lower receipt of PPP loans. So just to set the framework a little bit here. So a lot of times when we think about digital entrepreneurship, we may imagine, or I feel that sometimes people imagine this idea of people, the hustle and bustle in a co-working space, and we're just not in that environment anymore, particularly with COVID. And that's not where you see a lot of minority-owned businesses. What you do often see are minority-owned businesses who promote and market in peer-to-peer spaces and social networking sites, whether it be something, for instance, in like these imaging hair care services, selling equipment, selling new products. So there are a lot of peer-to-peer promotion of products and services among minority-owned businesses. So what's the difference? What do I mean by digital hospitality? Digital hospitality, I think of as sort of the surface level niceties of technology promotion, where we think about literacy or access in terms of simply use. We think about services that are offered in a digital first environment, or what they've coined in the UK, digital by default, that these online spaces offer neutral platforms for all people from all walks of life to be able to promote their services, and that all access is good access. And what I would like to keep in mind, you all to keep in mind, is the shift in thinking of it being more so for equity in terms of digital literacy, not only for technology use, but for creation. First, assessing if a digital only or a digital first space is adequate for the population that's going to be using a service or using or visiting a business. And acknowledging that online spaces are reflective of society. These aren't neutral only spaces. There are lots of accounts of minority owned businesses that in the research where they may not use their own images on their websites so as to not present themselves as minority owned businesses and things like that. And in terms of informed access, so making sure that people are aware that there are some risks that come with access, whether it be around privacy or security. So I'm often reminded of this quote that I see, and I'm not sure who to attribute it to, but all are welcome is not the same as this space was made for you. So I'm a big proponent of digital equity and not simply just access without sort of guided support there. So I just wanted to talk briefly about some barriers to digital entrepreneurship. I think a lot of minority-owned businesses are risk averse in part due to a lack of capital. They just don't have the ability to withstand some of the financial shocks in the ways that other businesses can. I think back to some previous work that I did recruiting graduate students to work in a certain sector as opposed to going into academia or government work, whereas the reason why they're choosing those fields is because there's more security behind that employment, and they have, a lot more risk associated with being able to step out on their own in terms of entrepreneurial spaces. Secondly, there are non-traditional financial practices in the sense of not using traditional brick and mortar businesses, perhaps a reliance on fintech applications such as Cash App or a Venmo or other sites or sources like that. Non-digital startups, their business may not have started in a digital space, and they were forced to shift in COVID in order to maintain the operation of their business. So it may not be their preferential space. They may actually have chosen not to pursue that initially. So acknowledging that that's not the space that their business started in. And as I mentioned before, a reliance on peer-to-peer sites as opposed to their own web presence. And a lot of minority-owned businesses also, their customer base is a large amount of trust is based on their relationship as opposed to their online presence on sites like Yelp, et cetera. I believe someone else has mentioned something similar. So from the research, there's one article that talks about some of what are the enabling conditions to support entrepreneurship. And the first to that was access to finance to address some of the lack of capital among minority entrepreneurs, the access to social networks so that they have those resources, those conversations with people, those connections that may happen typically in elevators or hallways, having that sense of connection and knowledge, and to an extent as well, from the respective educational and employment experiences, you gain those skills, how to use certain technologies, how to use certain platforms. So there's the researcher Dye and others identified in 2017 that these are sort of the foundational elements that are necessary for entrepreneurs to be able to enter the digital space. So I want to talk just briefly about how local governments can support. And I think the first thing I want to mention is the need for parallel efforts to promote access at the rural level and as well as through opportunity zones. So opportunity zones are a product of the Trump tax cuts, I believe 2017, opportunity for businesses, entrepreneurs to invest in businesses and in capital gains. Benefits from that over 10 years. But what we're seeing is that there's not a lot of investment going into technology and digital spaces. A lot of opportunity zone investments have gone into real estate development. So I just posted, this is a map of opportunity zones in the United States. And I encourage you to look into that if you're not familiar, but I imagine a lot of folks on this webinar today are. But I just posted a story of an investment group that has recently looked into supporting digital equity through opportunity zones so that we are supporting communities not just through real estate development that may contribute to some of the resident turnover in certain communities, so that investing that the people in those communities can support their businesses through broadband development in terms of fiber in their communities, et cetera. So additionally, how can local government supporting efforts for infrastructure as a form of digital equity? We recently saw President Biden's unrolling of a large infrastructure plan. So supporting efforts to educate folks at the state and federal level about what infrastructure means for your community and particularly what type of infrastructure needs that you have around broadband in your community is a good way, or whether or not it's promoting a dig once policy. Promoting access to information resource networks and ecosystems as a way to keep that conversation and that skills information flowing within communities of color. And as well as having spaces to create. I think a lot of times when we think about if you're in an area where you have maybe slower broadband speeds, it's very difficult to upload videos, or you may not have the resources to create a video that can be used for a couple of years to promote your business, the sort of evergreen videos. So opportunities for spaces to record and to produce and to upload is a way to support those small businesses in your community. Also, incentives for minority entrepreneurs to scale up. I think about one of my favorite vegan restaurants that was forced to go online during the pandemic, and just seeing their inability to understand or to know how to scale their business, because their business increased dramatically because they went from taking in-person orders to now doing a lot of orders by phone and a lot of orders by DoorDash. So there were times where it was either the food would sell out 3 hours before the business closed, or perhaps they would have too much food at the end of the night. So helping minority entrepreneurs understand how to scale up their business through digital resources. And also supporting regulatory efforts designed for non-traditional businesses. I think we saw this with the PPP loan program, that the way that it was structured, it didn't allow for a lot of businesses that weren't necessarily incorporated or didn't have existing business banking relationships with their local banks, weren't able to tap into that funding. Also supporting COVID-19 safety measures. Because so many minority businesses are in communities that are hard hit by COVID, there may be some apprehension to go back in person to these spaces. So supporting safety measures, whether it be through vaccines or barriers, et cetera. And lastly, an area that I wanted to expand on a bit is local governments can support training opportunities for minority entrepreneurs. So in terms of topics for training, some of the things that I've seen in my work as a practitioner that are needed for minority entrepreneurs are support for developing business plans, support and training for understanding the legal aspects of business, how to incorporate, what does it mean to have a copyright, app development for mobile reliance customers. We know that some racial and ethnic minority populations have an over-reliance on smartphones. So if you know that the population is going to be accessing information about your business, perhaps that you need an app for that. Or as I mentioned later on, optimizing the online presence through developing a quality website, making sure that you are appearing in search engine results, and use of sort of non-peer-to-peer promotion opportunities. How to use big data for growth, how to know how to scale up your business, how to use big data to understand, okay, well, if we have 10 customers this week, how many customers can we plan for in the coming weeks and months, et cetera. Something that I'm also seeing for businesses that provide health services is there's a lot of confusion around what does HIPAA compliance look like in an online environment, particularly if you're offering services. And lastly, as mentioned before, access to capital, whether it be through programs like the PPP or private programs such as Comcast Rise that was recently closed for opportunity for $10,000 grants for minority business owners. So in sort of some considerations for what the actual training can look like, consider weekends and after hours trainings. Sometimes folks, they're starting this possibly as a side hustle. So having options for trainings that are in the evenings and weekends, childcare. Sometimes folks need to bring their children with them. So is that something that you can offer to incentivize people to attend the training? Having former entrepreneurs who completed the training serving as trainers in the training, self-paced training, if it's something that's developed in a digital format at a basic literacy level for all types of entrepreneurs, and accessible in the sense of ability as well as location. And so lastly, as other folks have already mentioned, promoting partnerships with minority tech networks. They have a lot of information about what works, what they need already. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. When a lot of that information is out there already, we just need to ask. Digital inclusion coalitions, supporting entrepreneurs in that space. As well as non-bachelor degree educational programs, so community college programs. If you have someone coming out with construction or HVAC training, how to help them start up their small business and to get that information in a digital format, and supporting workforce development programs, apprenticeship programs related to digital entrepreneurial opportunities. So I think that's all I have for now.